Welcome to our epic ocean, where critical solutions to a planet in peril are brought to the surface. Our epic ocean celebrates all that is epic about the ocean and why it is the planet's most vital resource. And now to our host, Rich German.
Welcome, everybody. It's Rich German. We have an amazing interview lined up for you today with the incredible Dianna Cohen, co-founder and CEO of Plastic Pollution Coalition. Dianna, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Rich?
I am good. It's always good to see you.
You too.
So we're going to talk about a lot of different things, a lot of plastic talk for sure, as I'm sure you are quite used to. But I want to start with a little bit of a background on how you first fell in love with the ocean. I know you and I share a common passion for the ocean. How did you first fall in love with the ocean, and why do you care so much?
Well, I was born here in Los Angeles. I grew up going to the Pacific Ocean, going to Santa Monica, Malibu, Venice with my family. My dad's favorite thing was to go for really long walks in Malibu, Zuma, all of those places. It was always a really special family treat for us. And I think like lots of people around the world, I just feel so good when I'm in the water. And I didn't learn how to, or I call myself an eternally aspiring longboarder, but I didn't even begin attempting to surf at all until I was about 30. But prior to that, when I was 25, I became a certified diver, PADI diver. And I think my third open water dive was in the Outer Great Barrier Reef off of Lizard Island in Australia, northeastern Australia. And it was just so magical. And that was about 30 years ago. And I realize now that, quite a lot of the Great Barrier Reef's been damaged and destroyed through ocean acidification and, climate change, ocean sea temperature, sea levels rising, sea temperature rising, and obviously pollution. No consciousness really about that at the time, just growing up in the water, body surfing, longboarding, diving. I just slowly began to see more plastic in the water, not just here in Southern California, but also when I would travel in the Mediterranean, when I had the opportunity the first time to go to Hawaii, different places. At first, you don't notice it. And then slowly it kind of starts, creeping up on you. And it's one of those things that when you see it in the water, I would just always grab it. I think that's what we do. When you're conscious of the environment and nature, you grab it, you look for a place to put it, you look for a garbage can. I didn't give it a lot of thought. I wasn't thinking, what is this material made out of? Oh my gosh, how is it impacting things? I had none of that consciousness yet. But I was definitely noticing it, and I was noticing more and more. So over the course of my life, I've noticed more and more of it. About almost 30 years ago, I started making artwork. I had studied painting at UCLA, biology and art. And I was making paintings. And then when I graduated from college, I was painting and trying to pay my rent and do things with my artwork and be creative and curate things. But I also began to do collage work. And some of that work involved brown paper bags. And then I shifted from using the brown paper bags to adding a plastic bag that had a botanical image of a plant printed on it. And I thought, my God, there's such a deep irony in the fact that we print images of the natural world onto plastic bags. But again, not really thinking about it. Now, like hindsight's 2020. In the year 2020, we can look back and remember in my lifetime when paper bags, suddenly you had a choice of paper or plastic. And when that was introduced, it was really introduced because the concept was you were saving a tree by choosing the plastic, but without having awareness of what the plastic was made from. So anyway, with my artwork, there's just this deep irony in that imagery. And I began to use that and I'm going to use the word manipulate, but, reconstruct things with it and use it to talk to people, to communicate, to share a message about the things I had begun to think about. But again, I've been making that work for a long time. And it wasn't until about 2007, 2008, I started hearing about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and this idea that there was an island of trash, of plastic out in the middle of the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. So it's a much longer story, and like we can get into it if you want to, but I mean, really those were some awakening moments for me in this journey.
So my next question was going to be about your art. You're telling me that when you first started making the art with the plastic bags, it was not any kind of a statement. It was just for the sake of the art.
I was traveling a lot at the time with my partner. I had limited materials with me, just some watercolors and a sketchbook. I actually remember the first time I made a piece out of plastic. I was in a hotel somewhere, a motel. And I think I was with a bunch of people who were doing a benefit concert for an important issue that they felt strongly about. And I woke up early and I felt like making something. And I had a bright pink bag that, I had bought something in. So I had this bright pink plastic bag. I had some scissors in my bathroom bag. And I had a bag hanging in the closet of the hotel that said, was a shoe shine bag. Okay. And I cut the white bag that had this text on it and kind of reworked the text and cut up this pink bag and took the sewing kit that they'd given at the hotel and sat on the floor in the bathroom and started like sewing something together out of it. So that was the first piece that I made, and it was called Shine. But no, I really wasn't thinking about the damage that this material was doing to the ocean, to animals, to sea life and wildlife, to human health, to our air, to our food. I wasn't thinking about any of that yet. So I was really just using plastic to kind of, in a strange way, celebrate it. And I still think about it on one hand in this way. I mean, this is a valuable material. Plastic is made from petroleum and fossil fuels. It's made from animals and plants that went extinct or died a long time ago and were compressed for thousands and thousands of years under the ground, and now we extract it like this kind of blood out of the planet, the way that we feel that we are somehow as humans entitled to extract everything on the planet and use it up. And unfortunately, what happens to it when we use it to make plastic is when we use it to make anything, we then burn it at some point. So even if we've heated it and molded it and added other chemicals to it to turn it into plasticized the carbon source, which is from fossil fuels, it gets burnt. It gets burnt or it gets dumped in our environment, or so when we burn it, it becomes particulate pollution. It releases dioxins and other chemicals. When it ends up in the ocean, the first thing it does is it impacts sea life in the ocean through entanglement, et cetera. But it's also, plastic is oleophilic. So even the tiniest little plastic nurdle, like pre-consumer plastic ball or little bit that it's crumbled into, can collect other persistent organic pollutants to the surface. And then it's colorful, so it looks like food. So animals that live in the sea, wildlife in the sea, mistaken it, or if they're filter feeders, they open their mouth and this stuff comes in. And where it used to be all natural things that they could process, like squid and shrimp, krill, and all these different things that they're supposed to eat, that they've spent millions of years evolving so that they can eat, they're now getting a mouthful of plastic garbage. And what it's doing with animals that need to, descend in the water is it's making them buoyant and float. And it's also, impacting their entire digestional tract, and it's attracting other persistent organic pollutants to the surface. So all the pollutants that wash into the ocean, and everything washes down into the ocean through rivers, lakes, our gutters, our sewage systems, those chemicals as well, like pesticides, pharmaceuticals, flame retardants, those get attached to the surface of the plastic. And then that's ingested by the marine chain. And a lot of people in the world depend on wildlife from the sea life, as their primary source of protein. Correct. So it just comes back to bite us on the butt like 8 different ways. I had no idea that it was going to be such a huge issue. I was just concerned about the growing amount of it that I was seeing.
It's so interesting. I'm glad I asked the question because I would have assumed you were this trendsetter 30 years ago saying, look how bad this plastic is, but it was
No.
art material for you. Was there like an aha moment? You know, it sounded like it was kind of gradual for you over the years, seeing more and more plastic. Was there an aha moment when you said, okay, this is a freaking problem and I'm going to basically commit my work life to tackling this?
Um, I have had a lot of aha moments along the way, and I consider myself an eternally, again, aspiring, eternally curious student is what I would say. Like, ever curious student. So I learn new things every day. I mean, I read a news piece about a report that just came out of Denmark a few days ago or last week, that they're seeing microplastics in human placenta, which is a really deeply horrific, revelation in my opinion. Because, and they're seeing it both on the baby side and the mother's side of the placenta, which means it's in us. And we are looking at, I say we, but scientists are looking at microplastics, but we now are not just talking about, when we say microplastics, we mean microbeads, microfibers, plastic that's broken apart into smaller bits. And there are nanoplastics. There are plastics that are so small that they can potentially make that transference blood-brain barrier, blood barrier. And we don't know what that potentially is doing to our health and to changing us, because the chemicals used to make plastics and the additives added to the carbon source, so fossil fuels, or if it's a plant-based plastic, then corn or bulrush or hemp or whatever. If plasticizing chemicals are added to a carbon source to make plastic, those seem to be BPA, bisphenols, BPA, and if it's BPA free, then they're BPA substitutes, which we now know are equally bad, if not worse, to BPA, and then phthalates. So these groups of chemicals have also been identified as hormone disruptors. So phthalates, for example, at UC Irvine, they've been doing studies of phthalates, and they've also dubbed them obesogens. So they contribute to our bodies holding more fat. And when I say that they are endocrine disruptors, they also can affect our bodies like synthetic estrogen. Mm-hmm. So you can find with babies exposed to utero in BPA, which has probably been studied the most, shortened anogenital distance, smaller penis size, feminization of boys, so boys getting pudgy like breasts, early menses in girls, attention deficit disorder, a lower IQ. And that's babies exposed in utero. So we're literally changing future generations. And then in studies that have been done of the effects and the links for adults, they found that BPA is linked to diabetes and obesity, to breast cancer, brain cancer, and prostate cancer, and to lower sexual function, sterility, and infertility.
It's a hell of a list. Jeez. So is this what wakes you up in the morning and motivates you to do the work that you're doing?
It's funny because I, for some reason, wake up every morning feeling really positive about this. I don't know if I will forever, but currently I feel like we can actually change this. And the reason I feel like we can change this is because plastic is it's tangible. You can see it. Really, one of the emblematic signs of not only our kind of overconsumption and really a product of industry and the Industrial Revolution and the wonders of science, et cetera. But it's also when we design packaging for most of our food and beverages out of this material, and for our beauty products and for medical products, et cetera, I think what's happened with single-use design is that we have taken a valuable material and are using it in a totally irresponsible way. And, I've met people from the plastic industry. I tell them, I agree with you. Plastic, it's a valuable material. So why are we designing things with intended obsolescence out of a valuable material? It's just idiotic to me. So I'm much more interested in using materials that are obviously non-toxic and biobenign and are not going to leach micro amounts into my food and beverages, right. But also that have more of a kind of inherent beauty or aesthetic to them, like ceramic or steel or glass or wood, copper. I've traveled quite a bit and had this terrific opportunities to get to see traditional, long time traditional uses for different plant-based materials. Like even if you look historically, growing up here in Southern California, if you look at Mexico and Central America, South America, the use of corn husks or banana leaves to wrap food and steam it, to serve food on. I've seen a lot of that in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia, from Indonesia to Palau. I've seen a lot of this in India, where things are wrapped or you eat on thali plates, which are stainless steel, or with a kind of tiffin or bento box system for delivering lunch that's reusable, that's cleaned every day and reused again. I mean, many of these systems are things that would seem completely normal to many people's grandparents or great grandparents. And the fact that we've moved so far away from these materials makes me sad, but I also feel hopeful with creative design and just the recognition of the benefits of supporting refill and reusable systems.
Well, I feel like there's such an elevated consciousness around plastic being bad, and thanks a lot to the work that your organization is doing. Like people, that's why it's interesting to me that 30 years ago you didn't do it as this statement. You didn't think of it. Nobody thought of it, right? I don't think, maybe the plastic companies realized from the get-go this was going to be a really bad thing and they didn't care. In fact, when you go to them, you mentioned a minute ago, and you talk about it, do they care?
I don't go to the petroleum industry. When I talk to folks who have a relationship to the plastic industry, and I would call them representatives of Coke, Pepsi, Nestle's, Unilever. When I talk to people from those companies, they know that they have a problem. And you see it in the shifts and the transformations of their marketing and advertising. You see it when you see a company like Coca-Cola do most of their advertising with glass, their iconic glass bottle in the ad, as opposed to a plastic bottle in the ad. But then you listen to them when they get up at the World Economic Forum and claim that people want their plastic bottles. Well, I mean, it's a ridiculous idea. The truth is that companies like that have done everything in their power to shoot down bottle bills and policy and legislation that would support a refillable system. But when I was a kid and in the 70s, if you went to the market, everything was sold in glass bottles. And those glass bottles had value and had a deposit. Right. And everyone from kids to whoever in the community collected them and returned them. Families returned them, got that deposit back. And those bottles were sterilized and refilled, not smashed, not tossed, but they were sterilized and refilled. And when you do things like that and you shorten the loop so that it's being done at a more local or citywide level, that's very doable. And we're seeing a rebirth in the last few years of companies that deliver milk or deliver juices and charge a deposit and you roll it over. And that's very, very promising. But I'd like to see that made available for everyone.
When you say they know they have a problem, in their mind, what's the problem? That they're destroying the planet, or that people don't want their plastic? What's the problem to them?
I think the overarching problem is they're contributing to the destruction of the planet.
That's what I'm wondering. Do they even care? Or are they just making money? And
I can't say whether they care or not. I mean, they're a corporation, and unfortunately, it seems like corporations are beholden to their stockholders, and those
right.
stockholders want to see profit. But I mean, the world and the planet hasn't evolved to be ever generating profit, and there's got to be value assigned to all the costs that have somehow been externalized that make plastic look like an inexpensive material to use. It's not an inexpensive material if you factor in the cost to the planet, to our health, to how our use of it disproportionately impacts lower income communities, indigenous communities, communities of color, fence line and frontline communities. I mean, we are poisoning people. There's a piece from CNN today about a little girl in the UK who died of air pollution. She died from air pollution. Well, what is air pollution? And what generates air pollution? It comes from the release of, particulate, toxic particulate and pollution into the air. Well, our use of plastic generates this. And then at the end of life, especially if it's a single-use item or those tiny little sachet packets, if you've traveled in India and Africa and Southeast Asia, these become very popular, these kind of single serving things that come on rolls, and people can just buy a tiny little bit. But those are made out of a kind of mixture of plastic, sometimes plastic foil, plastic paper. They're not recycled. I had folks from Unilever tell me that they were so proud. They had just built this new sachet recycling plant in Surabaya, in Jakarta. But I asked them how they were recycling them, and ultimately it kind of came to seem like it's chemical recycling. So it's still going to release pollution. And I said, how are you going to get all of those tiny little sachet packets back from thousands of islands all over Indonesia? And their solution is, we're going to build more of these plants. But we can't just burn it all up. We can't just burn it all up. And folks that we work with and our colleagues who are living on the Gulf Coast in Houston, who are living in Louisiana, who are living in Los Angeles and Long Beach, near facilities that are processing these chemicals, processing extractive stuff, making things out of plastic, producing things out of plastic, and then doing the waste management for that, which again is usually burning it, incineration, but under different names like pyrolysis, waste to energy, waste to fuel. Well, if you're making fuel, what is fuel for? Fuel is something ultimately you're going to burn.
Right.
So all of this burning releases carbon into the air, and we're polluting ourselves, and particulate pollution. So, I mean, look, I'm not a scientist, so maybe I sound silly talking about it this way, but it's real. And I didn't know any of these things before we co-founded Plastic Pollution Coalition. I spent a year working on a plan to go out to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch with a cargo ship and these decommissioned fishing trawlers and, a crane and a cold molding machine. And I thought that I could just travel to an island, scoop it all up, chip it up, make bricks out of it, and bam. But what I realized is we need to focus our energy on stopping it. That's right. Where are all the different upstream points that we can hit?
So let's go there. And first of all, I want to acknowledge you for maintaining optimism in the face of all that you know. That's a bold thing right there. And I really want to take this conversation in the direction of solutions. I want to hear what's being done, what PPC is doing, and also what our listeners can do, because we have an audience of people who care like you do. The reason I started by finding out, hey, why do you care? Because I love hearing that story. I think you know a little of my story and my love for the ocean and the dolphins and why I care. And when you talk about, like, I not that I don't love humans, but in some ways I care about the marine animals more because they can't do anything about the crap that we're doing to them. We can. So
and they're probably, frankly, so much smarter than we are.
They're definitely smarter than we are. So let's talk about what your coalition is doing. In fact, let's start by talking about the coalition itself and the word collaboration. Mm-hmm. So this podcast, Our Epic Ocean, falls under the umbrella of my nonprofit, which is Project O, which you know about because we have a project called the Blue City Network.
Yes.
And your organization is partners with us on that. My main business that I've had for many years is completely based on collaboration. It's has nothing to do with the ocean and environmental space. It's about entrepreneurship,
Mhm.
but it's all about people working together to support each other.
Mhm.
And to me, and I'm preaching to the choir with you, the answers to these problems lie in collaboration. They lie in us learning to work together. It's not about anyone doing it on their own and, saving the world. It's not going to happen. So can you share a little bit about your philosophy when it comes to collaboration? You've built an organization that's collaborating with 1,200 organizations. Talk to me about collaboration.
Well, so when I originally had that idea to go clean up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, I then realized that was just going to be a small drop in the bucket relative to how much was being generated. So when I first, before we created the coalition, I had been looking at this idea of going out and cleaning up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. When I realized that I wanted to focus rather on different upstream points, it became apparent that there were so many different organizations and groups. And I wasn't really thinking of businesses originally when we created the coalition, but how could we harness the power so that everybody could work together towards some common goals that we set. So our initial common goals that we set when we created the coalition were the idea to take the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle, add a 4th R to the front, which is whenever possible, refuse single-use plastic. So this idea of refusing single-use plastic, adding that to what had already been created, and then also how are we going to shift the narrative so that people would stop calling this stuff marine debris, litter, rubbish, waste, and garbage, and instead call it what it is. If 70 to 90% of what we're finding in the ocean is plastic, let's identify it as plastic. And when it gets in the ocean, it's plastic pollution. So really, those were our first 2 main goals. And I think that is a big part of what we still do in educating people and raising awareness. So common language that people felt like they could get around and get behind together. So in our first year, we were 10 organizations. 1 company joined us. It was Natra Cares that makes women's, feminine hygiene products. Okay. And our second year, we were about 25 groups. And now we've grown to over 1,200. And in the last 3 years, we've had a really big, influx of businesses wanting to join us, which to me and to us says that the business community is waking up to this issue, to this problem, and that they would like to be part of the solution.
That's powerful. A bunch of nonprofits coming together is kind of like, duh. Of course, we all want that, but when business wants to be involved, that's a big step up, right?
Yeah. So I mean, and so the thing that we've seen, with collaboration is obviously it's hard. Being part of a coalition is hard. It can be challenging and difficult to be part of an alliance or part of a group that has a lot of different players in it.
For sure.
But if you can get people to commit to some specific language and goals, that is very worthwhile. And I think having created the coalition, and from the coalition also having helped co-found Break Free from Plastic, which is also an international movement that has a lot of the focuses in Southeast Asia, that's been, a really interesting experience for all of us. But for this presidential election, this was the first time that I would say the movement is grown up enough. I was going to call us teenagers, but we've grown up enough that we were able to work together with 20 different groups and create a specific asks and requests and an 8-point strategy around a plastic presidential action plan.
Is this plastic free president that you're talking about?
This is plastic free president. That's the hashtag. So, and this is just the beginning of that. So what will it mean to have an engagement with Biden and his new cabinet? They are making a lot of commitments, and they're looking to bring us back into, the Paris Accord. And there's all kinds of tremendous stuff happening. Also in the new year, we'll be supporting the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, which we helped launch in February this year with Udall and Lowenthal, Senator Udall and Congressman Lowenthal, and 2.0 version of that will be coming out in the new year. So There's also the Basel Treaty. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting stuff happening, and it's happening at the state level, at the city level, at the state level, at a country level with commitments, and then internationally, and people looking at how to make commitments internationally to phase out single-use plastics.
In your mind, okay.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
The word impact comes to mind. We'll segue soon into what our individual listeners can do, but from an impact standpoint, what's the biggest lever that we can pull? Is it changing legislation? Is it a statewide? Is it a federal thing, international? I guess what I'm asking, is it more legislation or businesses changing the way they operate, or is it everything?
I think it's all of the above,
Like, where do you focus your energy, hoping that you can, what's the X factor where if we can do that, that's going to have the biggest impact? Or do you not even think that way?
We do think that way, but we also think about which tool, what tools can we continue to provide and amplify that either we've created or created in collaboration with other coalition members, or that coalition members have created that will be useful to help move the dial. So I'm all about how do we move the dial? And I think that,
right,
for the Presidential Plastics Action Plan, we joined more than 550 organizations and businesses to launch it. And it's a really good example of people coming together to take a step in the right direction towards a plastic pollution-free America, towards a more just and equitable world. All of these things are interconnected.
Tell me more about what does that look like, plastic-free president? What will that look like in a practical way?
So what it would look like in a practical way is we actually provided Biden and his cabinet with 8 points that he could go to that are things that he could implement through executive order. So I'll give you an example of one. In our national parks really used to be full of drinking fountains. So is it possible that, again, our national parks could be full of drinking fountains and whatever we call them, hydration stations, refill stations that people would use rather than the park selling a bunch of plastic bottled beverages?
Okay.
I mean, to me, that's just a no-brainer. You're already going camping. You've already got your camping gear. One of my colleagues who is a project of Plastic Pollution Coalition, she's a program director and does advocacy with us, is Jackie Nunez. And she founded The Last Plastic Straw. And Jackie always carries what we refer to as her urban packer kit. So anytime she and I are out in the world, in my bag or my purse or my pocket, I've always got a fold up spork. I've always got some bamboo utensils with chopsticks and a couple steel straws tucked in it, or, she's always got that. And we both carry steel cups or an insulated cup. We both carry reusable steel water bottles. She carries these wonderful little titanium camping plates. And I can't tell you how many times we've used them. And she usually carries 2. They're super lightweight. She was a river guide. So she's really used to packing stuff up really tight and together and just being prepared. But I've been with her when we've been on expeditions or in meetings or traveling for projects, and we've had all the power go out and a generator that's not enough to put the power back on where any of us are. And Jackie will just very casually pull out a solar paneled little lantern, pop it open, click it on. It's got a little Velcro on top of it or a carabiner, hook it up above us, and we all just keep eating or drinking or working or whatever we're doing. And she's like very nonchalant about the fact that we should all be thinking of ourselves as urban packers and be self-sufficient. And it's not a bad way just to be prepared for life in general, with all the onslaught of climate change related hurricanes, typhoons, et cetera, that are coming at us.
They're happening.
Or fires. So it's not bad to just be prepared and be self-sufficient. And it makes you feel good if you're that way. If we ever get to go out to jobs again outside of home,
when?
outside of our rooms. It's nice to be able to bring those things. And it was wonderful when companies were beginning to and are continuing to incentivize bringing your own reusable cup and giving you a small discount when you are getting coffee or tea or something like that every day and you're on the move. So I think that, we've seen a tremendous shift in that. And I know for Blue Cities, that's a part of Blue Cities. So
100%. Do you feel like the pandemic has been a step back in some ways with restaurants and takeout, all the plastic with takeout, and drives me nuts, as you can imagine, paddling out and there's masks in the ocean. It's just like, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we basically have documented what COVID has done to our work. And so, right now and through this whole period, the plastic industry was right there, and they used the coronavirus to try and block laws prohibiting single-use plastics, like plastic bag bans. And they really capitalized on the pandemic as well by misleading and portraying products as being necessary for public health. Like we all suddenly need to be using single-use plastic throwaway things, or else we're going to get COVID.
Right.
And what's interesting about that is there have been short-term studies. There was one study from the National Institute of Health, the CDC, UCLA, and Princeton. It was scientists, and it was in the New England Journal of Medicine. And it indicated that the virus could be stable on plastic surfaces for as long as 2 to 3 days. So we discussed it within the coalition, and we made a decision that we really remain unswerving in our work to reduce single-use plastic, especially non-medical use.
Right. That
could potentially become a vehicle for the virus transmission and is definitely worsening the global plastic pollution crisis. It's also known that, if you're using more plastics, and I feel like we all kind of got thrown into that with the pandemic, or ordering takeaway food and things like that, you are potentially increasing your exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals if you're eating out of plastic and styrofoam, polystyrene. So it's not good for you. It's not good for your own health, and it's not good for the health of younger generations or future generations.
I kind of feel like that piece is what will create the biggest shift. Meaning, like, I always say, like with the ocean, it's such this big, vast body of water, and it's hard to relate to. But if all of a sudden people realize, oh, wait, this could kill me, and I'm feeding my kids plastic and they're breathing this in, like that, hopefully that would be a strong impetus for people to really wake up and change their behavior.
Well, I don't know if you had a chance to tune into it, and it's recorded on our website, at the Plastic Pollution Coalition website, but I moderated a conversation that was, for me, so fascinating with Dr. Sylvia Earle, her deepness, super aquanaut, marine biologist, so much more than that.
Yes.
And Dr. Kathy Sullivan, who is not only an aquanaut, but she's also an astronaut. She was the first woman to walk in space, and she's been to the Space Center multiple times. And in June this year, she had an opportunity to go in a submersible to one of the deepest parts of the Mariana Trench. It's called like the Challenger Deep. Mm-hmm. And she's the most vertical person in the world. She's traveled the deepest,
highest and the lowest.
And they had this incredible conversation. For me, it was really pretty captivating to listen to two scientists who have had so many experiences and so many observations, and hear them talk about plastic pollution, ocean plastic pollution, or ocean, marine debris, and what's happening with space debris, which is something that I only learned about. I first heard about space debris in 2013. Okay. But apparently we've got millions of little pieces of garbage, plastic and metals, et cetera, floating around in orbit around the planet from either destroyed, or impacted satellites and different things that have been sent up there. And there's this incredible NASA animation for it that I highly recommend people check out. But their conversation was just really thought-provoking for me.
We'll share
And
that link. Let's share that link for sure.
yeah, oh, I'd be happy to. But I was going to say, like, back to positives. One of the things that we worked on and released at the beginning of this year or late last year, it was early this year, was our healthy pregnancy guide. And we
Yeah.
produced it with our coalition member Made Safe. And this is the second guide that we've done with them. It's digital, it's free, it's online. And what it really is, it's called a healthy pregnancy guide. And before that, we did a healthy baby guide with them. But what they both really are is they're plastic-free baby guide and they're a plastic-free pregnancy guide. And what they actually are is they're both plastic-free living guides. So they're packed with really useful information for everybody about when you make decisions about what kind of paint you're going to use in your house and which kind of materials you want to have in your kitchen or in your bathroom, or to package your products in, to cook them in, just to use on your body, like, clothing, shower curtains. I mean, it's very comprehensive. And I feel so good about being able to bring information like that, hopefully to everyone. Everyone who has access to the internet.
Well, let's talk more about that, because I know part of your vision is to help individuals embody a zero waste life, toxic free life, eliminate as much single use as possible. So any tips that you can give, and maybe even repeat some of what you just shared, and we'll share links to everything here. But what can people do? Because I know people get frustrated because this problem seems so massive, and what can I do? And if we're taking steps in our own lives, then we at least feel like we're part of the solution and not adding to the problem. So please give us as many practical tips as you can.
Well, I'll give you one that's just like an actionable tip that people could do right now if you are noticing this. But Oceana released a report yesterday about e-commerce packaging data, and they found that they analyzed e-commerce packaging data, and they found that Amazon, surprise, surprise, generated 465 million pounds of plastic packaging waste in 2019. Wow. So that's the year before this pandemic. So you can only imagine how much that has, it
might have doubled in 2020.
Probably more than doubled. And the thing is, this includes like air pillows and bubble wrap and other plastic packaging items. And those add up to approximately 7 billion Amazon packages delivered in 2019. So one of the things that you could do, actually the report did an estimate that Amazon's plastic packaging waste in the form of the air pillows alone would circle the earth more than 500 times. So we have a petition on our website to call on Amazon. The hashtag is plastic free Amazon, but to call on Amazon to stop using all this single-use plastic packaging for, their shipments, and to work to find ways to create reusable shipping containers and packaging, or packageless, packaging for people to use. I just thought I would bring that up since all that report just came out yesterday.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. Other tips, other thoughts? Tips
and thoughts for you. Okay. So the most basic things that I can tell you I do in my own life, and I use my life as an experiment. I really try to mainly buy my food from the open farmers markets. I know that's not an option for people who live in colder climates, and especially with COVID, but I feel really lucky to be in Southern California, be able to go to farmers markets almost every day of the week. Mm-hmm. I bring my own baskets. I bring my own bags. My preference is not to use plastic bags of any kind, but to use actual physical baskets, or cloth bags, canvas bags. I just find they're stronger and I can throw them in the wash. So bringing your own bag is really key. A lot of times I carry a tiny little, like a Chico bag that folds up really small or folds into itself. I just keep that in my purse so that I always have some kind of bag with me, or a little mesh crocheted kind of netted one that folds up small. So I always have a bag with me. And then as soon as you get home, obviously take your groceries or whatever you bought out of it and put that right back in that spot so that you always have it with you.
I could be better at that. I always forget to put my bag back in my car and then
Yeah. Well, but so that's the thing. You've got to put it back on the door where you're
Right.
going to walk out, or back on your bicycle, or back on the front door, or wherever it is in your life that you're going to see it and remember to bring it again. And so that's one.
Also,
Two,
not to cut you off, but if you don't have access like you or I do to farmers markets every day, if you're going to a regular grocery store, one thing I've done is you don't need to put your fruits and vegetables in a plastic bag. Just dump them in your cart.
yeah.
Like that's a simple thing also.
Yeah. So, and also aim to buy food that's unpackaged. It ultimately, yes, it's going to need a little bit of preparation, but it's better for you, healthier for you, and healthier for your family, and potentially less expensive than buying processed, pre-prepared stuff. So that's a good way to go too. I am finding, even with COVID now, that a few local places around me will, if I call them to order something, will allow me to bring my own steel containers or glass containers or glass jars. When I order something, I go to them right away and they put my food in that for me, as long as they're clean. So places are doing that for me, which I think is really nice of them. But obviously these are my local little places that I go, so they know me.
Like,
but
here comes
I say like, just develop relationships with the places that you normally go. It's hard right now because people aren't maybe going to an office like they did before. But I used to say this when I was invited to come in and speak to companies too. Are there places where every week you order food from, I don't know, Chipotle, or like, a local Chinese place, or a local Mexican place, or just some kind of local bistro or food where you regularly get it, or get it for your employees and serve everybody lunch. If you do something like that, then wouldn't it be worthwhile to try and set up even a pilot or some kind of program with that place where they, even if you invest in purchasing containers, they make a special arrangement with you to put your food in those containers, like a bento box, and label it for each person with a piece of tape. So we've done that like out on dives and expeditions, although sadly I haven't been on one of those in over a year. But if you have the opportunity to be out. The other thing I always do is, anywhere that I go, or if I'm ordering something online, I look around, I ask questions, I talk to the person, I let them know that I'm trying to order things or get things that are not wrapped in plastic. And I ask them if that's going to be possible. Oftentimes they'll say to me, oh, well, we actually have some of these paper boxes or something else, but we don't use those very often. So I'll encourage them to use that instead. That said, my caveat is most of that stuff does have a certain percentage of plastic, or like PFAS or some kind of coating on it that makes it, gives it a kind of barrier. So that stuff is not leaking through it, that's not necessarily good for my health, for anybody's health. So, as you get deeper into it, you learn. But I carry my bamboo utensils with me. I have a set that's got fork, knife, spoon, and chopsticks, because I love to eat with chopsticks. Like I said, I supplemented that by adding a couple stainless steel straws. I also have a final straw that looks like a magic wand and like pops out of a little container. It's actually they just started making a final fork too, and a spork.
You must get stuff every week in the mail.
Well, no, I don't get stuff every week, but when I see things and I'm interested in them, I'll order them because I want to check them out and know what they are.
People would be sending their things they're creating to you.
Well, sometimes people do, if I'm lucky, but many times I want to support businesses that are doing things like that and check out their product first, just to know what it is. But there are really cool companies too that are creating models that I like a lot. There's a company called Vesselware, that does a reusable steel cup, and it's a deposit system. And they launched in the I think in Boulder and the Denver area and in Northern California. There's a company called Dispatched Goods. I know they're also doing a lot in San Francisco and the Bay Area, because San Francisco made a huge commitment, so did Berkeley, to phase out single-use plastics. So now they've got to figure it all out, right? I really like what both of those companies are doing. There's a company called Lollyware that is doing a plastic substitute as a straw, and it's made out of seaweed. That's really interesting to me. I'm looking for myself and my family on a personal level for products that are unpackaged, nude food, shop naked, things that are not wrapped. I'm looking for non-toxic products. I'm looking for non-toxic packaging. I'm looking for bio-benign. I'm looking for things that are not going to impact our health.
Yes. Let's go back a little. You just mentioned a bunch of different businesses. How can we as individuals get governments and businesses to step up in terms of regulation, legislation, better practices? These are great tips on, not us individually not using plastic, but I think it feels like a bigger lever is completely ban anything single, not just plastic, but anything single use as an example. So what can an individual do to help move that forward? Things like that.
You can do anything from engage on a personal level by writing letters to management or to the CEOs and COOs of companies, letting them know that, I used to buy your product, but now that you've switched all your bottles to plastic, I'm much less inclined to buy it.
Right.
You can let people know, because companies listen to the consumers that buy their products. So you can let them know. You can let managers know at shops that you'd like them to find a particular product in glass of some kind, or let them know the name of the brand. You can also support policy and legislation at the city, state, and federal level. So get involved, sign on, share petitions, take action.
How can people get involved with your coalition to do this?
To do that? So you can just become a member. You just sign up at plasticpollutioncoalition.org. And there are 3 different ways you can join us. You can join us as an individual, you can join us as a business, or you can join us as an organization. Or if you've got an organization and you would like to also join us as a business, you can do that as well, or have a business. If you've got different things going on, you can join us from different perspectives, because there will be different things that will be of interest to you. We have a whole take action section, and you can go and have a look at those petitions and calls to action and sample letters. You can download guides and use them personally in your own life, or use, for example, we have a campus plastic reduction guide we created with Post Landfill Action Network. They were based out of the University of New Hampshire. Now they're based in Philadelphia, and it's a student group that's focused on zero waste. And we created a guide with them. All these guides are free. They're on our website. We also have a beta tool that we've been working on for a few years that is a global plastic reduction legislative toolkit. And people are welcome to sign up and use that and submit things to it.
Good.
And,
it just seems to me, with all the work that you're doing, it makes sense to join your coalition and support something that's already got great momentum. So a few more questions that I feel are really important. What can you tell me about marine biodegradable alternatives to plastic? Like, there's got to be, I've heard of a lot of biodegradable alternatives. I haven't really seen anything that's super marine biodegradable, which obviously is important to people like you and I.
Well, there's been some focus around that, and I know that the X Prize has looked at that, but I personally don't think that that's a great idea. And I'll tell you why.
Please.
People don't know the difference. What do all of these numbers mean on plastics, 1 through 7? 7 means other. And when bioplastics or plant-based plastics or supposedly compostable or biodegradable plastics get in the mix with other plastics, they screw up everything.
Okay.
So to have a focus on marine biodegradable plastics, what I'm concerned about happening is that people will throw all plastic in the ocean, because it's very difficult to differentiate which is what. But the truth of this all is that chasing arrow symbol with the numbers doesn't actually mean very much. And it certainly does not mean that any of those plastics are being recycled or downcycled. It does not mean that. It is really a visual misrepresentation, unfortunately. And the problem is that as companies and organizations and universities and funds move away from investing in fossil fuels, we are ending up with a glut of fossil fuels. And what that does is it makes plastic even cheaper. And so we are seeing this exponential growth of production of single-use plastic and plastic packaging. At the same time that, again, the fossil fuel industry, the petrochemical industry is breaking new ground to build frackers and ethylene crackers and reboot the entire Ohio River Valley, where they're going to pollute all the poor people who live there who were already polluted from coal before.
Right.
You know, so it is like, sorry, I'm going to go to the dark place again, but like on the most primal level, we are poisoning ourselves with this stuff. And most people have no idea that this is being done to us, that this is happening. I mean, you should never microwave anything in plastic or with a plastic film on top of it. I don't even think you should cook anything in foil. And if something arrives to you in foil and you're home or you have access, I would suggest you move it to glass, ceramic, or a steel, some kind of steel or cast iron container to cook it in.
I don't look at this as going to the dark side. To me, this is about awakening people.
Yeah.
We don't know what we don't know. Like, it reminds me of the scene from The Graduate when, he tells Dustin Hoffman, plastics, that's where it's at. We didn't know. Now you're doing the work, and hopefully just being here on this platform is helping spread that word more. So people are like, oh, I didn't realize that. And then we can start, behavioral changes. And then, like you said, if enough people say, no, we don't want your freaking plastic anymore, they're going to have to figure something else out. Right. I mean, is that?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. If you're like Rich or like me and you love the ocean and you feel better in the ocean than you do almost anywhere,
Yes.
And I think we feel that way because we came from the ocean. Human beings came from the ocean. And, when we cry, our tears are salty. And when we bleed, our blood is salty. And when we create new human beings, we create them in like a little seawater environment in front of our bodies.
Yeah.
We are the ocean. We are nature. We are not something separate from any of these. We're not separate. None of this is separate. And you can't silo things. So I think it's really important just to realize this is what's happening. This is the truth. And we have done damage to ourselves by using this. So if you love the ocean, if you want to protect the planet, the ocean, the blue heart of the planet, what Sylvia calls it, and space from plastic debris and plastic pollution, then the way to do that is to make a conscious decision at any level that you're able to,
right,
to reduce your plastic footprint. And I think it's that simple. And, I'm not asking anybody to be perfect. I am certainly not perfect. And I live with other people who are not perfect, but you start somewhere, you make a choice, you do the best you can, and you educate yourself, and then you help educate your family and your friends and people that you care about and you love. And that can extend from you into your business, your school, the places that you are a patron of. And it comes from conversations and relationships with people and looking for smart ways to reinforce and uplift smart alternatives and solutions that are non-plastic, non-toxic, biobenign, reusable, refillable, regenerative. I really feel like we can do it. And just to watch the growth in this movement and to watch all these other big nonprofits come into this arena and space with us as allies and care about it. And that's everybody from the Earth Day Network to Nat Geo to World Wildlife Fund to Greenpeace is incredible. And, Environment America and Environment California, to watch everybody begin to see this is all interconnected. All of it's interconnected. And if we want to address climate and climate change, plastic contributes to that, and we need to address plastic. If we want to address our health and prevention, we need to address plastic. Plastic contributes to these health issues. And it's very important for us to take a look at all the places that it's so insidious, but all the places that it comes into and touches our lives.
I'm glad you bring up like climate change, because sometimes I worry, and I hope this comes out right, that there's so much focus now on plastic pollution. We don't hear as much about sea level rising and overfishing and climate change and some of these other major issues. Does that, you know what I'm saying? Does that at all concern you, or are they're all one and the same in a way because everything affects everything else?
Well, I think they're all one and the same. I mean, plastic contaminates soil, air, water, communities, and landfills. Plastic harms animals via consumption, blockage, entanglement. Plastic's made from oil and gas. They're non-renewable fossil fuels. It releases greenhouse gases. It contributes to climate change, and it's tangible. So, I don't know exactly what to do when somebody says to me, we need your help addressing ocean acidification. But the truth is, if I stop using a bunch of single-use plastic, I am contributing to reducing ocean acidification. I am contributing to reducing incineration. And I am contributing to alleviating or addressing climate change. So all of these things are interconnected. Our health is intertwined with all of it. And, if the ocean's not healthy and our air and soil and food and water are not clean, we are not healthy and the planet's not healthy.
And that was my point. If it's now become a personal health issue, a crisis, and if that's what it takes for us to change our behaviors for the sake of the ocean,
so be it.
So be it. I want to end on this. It keeps coming to my head because you mentioned space multiple times. Twice in the last 4 days, I watched this movie, The Phenomenon, which is it's the most compelling thing that I've ever seen, documentary that says that there's basically other life out there and that they visited us. And what's compelling to me about it is not the fact that there's other life in this universe and that we're not the only intelligent life out there. I don't think that's any great thought. But in this movie, you haven't seen it yet, have you?
No, I just wrote it down.
Good. So number one, there's this high-level lieutenant who basically says, look, these aliens are telling us that we are destroying our planet, and what the hell are we doing?
Right.
You'll see in the movie, he has this mic drop moment where he says that and walks away. And then at the end, not to give away the whole thing, but they interview these kids in Zimbabwe in the 90s, where dozens of them had this encounter where this spaceship supposedly lands on the schoolyard and they had contact. And they all said the same exact thing. And if you watch it, I think you'll believe it, because there's no reason these kids would make this up. But the point is, these aliens, they didn't speak to them, but it was this nonverbal contact where the aliens basically, the guy interviews the kids and he's like, what was the communication? And every kid said the same thing. Like, what are you doing to your planet? Your technology is destroying your planet. It was almost as if these aliens are out there checking out the whole universe and they find this planet, the Earth, that has water and life and all these amazing resources. And they're just telling us, like, what are you doing? Like, we've gone everywhere and this is like the best spot and you're living in it and you're destroying it. It was actually very profound. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it in the last several days. I watched it twice. So when you mentioned space, I didn't ever even thought about the garbage we're shooting up into space. So yeah.
I mean, we don't need aliens to come from space and tell us that we're screwing up. Sorry, I keep using that word. But I mean, we don't know, they don't need to come here and tell us. So we could just open our eyes and look around. We can listen to, every kid who's part of Fridays for Future and the Sunrise Movement, and every Greta Thunberg who just looks at us and says, why are you doing this? And why are you doing that? Don't you see? And of course we see but we're also great at a kind of denial because we're moving so quickly.
But to end on a positive, like you said, consciousness around this is elevating. Individuals are making new decisions in their behavior. It's filtering up into, it's almost like, what's the most impactful thing? Is it the government down, or is it us up? And to your point, it's everything. We're empowering individuals to change their behaviors. You're going after business and governments to make better policies that are going to affect everything. So I just want to say, and then I'll give you the final word. I just want to acknowledge you for the work that you do. Like, you don't have to be doing this. You could be just in your garage creating your art and making music and being happy. And the fact that that's why I started this conversation by saying, like, why are you doing this? Like, why does this matter to you? And I know
I actually didn't tell you why I'm doing it.
Oh, then let's end with why. Please.
Okay. Oh, well, okay. So the reason that we are so committed to, addressing plastic pollution and working towards a world free of plastic pollution is that when I was a teenager, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it was estrogen receptive. And after about 4 years of treatment, she died. She was 42 when she died. Oh. We now know that it didn't mean anything to me when I was 13 to 17 years old, but we now know that the chemicals in plastic function like synthetic estrogen. So if something's estrogen receptive, then this plastic and the chemicals in plastic potentially fed her breast cancer. And like I said, these chemicals have been linked to breast cancer, to prostate cancer, to brain cancer. So it's very, very personal for me. And it's funny in a way that I feel like my life came full circle through my artwork to learn about this material, to learn about this issue. I would never have imagined in a million years it would have taken me back to thinking about how my family was impacted and how we lost my mom, and she was 42. We didn't know that. We ate off of melamine plates, and we ate polystyrene, styrofoam cup of soup, hot boiling water into styrofoam. And when I think of all the stuff that we ate and did, because nobody knew, people didn't know it was bad for you. It is really, really personal for me. It's between the ocean and between my interest in the fact that I consider myself a citizen scientist, my interest in science, and my interest in art, and using art as a form of communication to help raise awareness so that we can, shift the whole system, which is basically what we need to do. I feel that I've been given this very special opportunity to work on the biggest art piece I've ever worked on in my life, and it involves human health. I work with my sister Julia, who's based in Washington, D.C. She's our managing director, and she has a master's degree in public health and child and maternal health. So this is very personal for us. And we have a long way to go. And I don't have a huge amount of tolerance for big companies that are like these, I don't want to say dinosaurs because I love dinosaurs, but they are dinosaurs in their thinking, that they can continue business as usual and the status quo to make a buck at the impact and the expense of life on the planet for every living thing on the planet. I mean, that's just insane. It's not comparable. Like, those things don't weigh out against each other. And frankly, it's wrong. So if anyone who works for those companies is listening to your program, they should know that it's really up to all of us, and look inside of yourself and think about what you care about. This is not about doing a beach cleanup. That is not what is going to solve this problem. What is going to solve this problem is system shift on a massive level, policy and legislation, extended producer responsibility, and investment in alternative, sustainable products that are non-toxic and biobenign, and systems that are refill and reuse systems. So I'm all about that. And obviously helping educate people and raise awareness to get them to move in the right direction. So everyone is welcome. I hope everyone in the world joins Plastic Pollution Coalition. We're mightier together. and we are moving the dial and changing things. So I look forward to working with everyone.
Well, thank you for sharing that about your mom.
Sure.
That helps. I like hearing the real reason people do what they do. So I on a personal level, thank you for sharing that. And on a bigger level, thank you for all the work that you are doing. We're going to share lots of links with everybody so they know how to connect with your organization and check out all the cool stuff that you shared. Dianna, thank you for your heart, for your time, for everything that you do and who you are. I can't wait to see you again, and hopefully sooner rather than later, give you a big hug. It's been way too long, and I really appreciate everything that you shared today.
Thank you.
That's our
Thank
show.
you.
Everyone.
Thanks, Rich, for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone.